I first laid eyes on the Perelman Center a little more than a year ago. I'd been professor at Drexel for 35 years and was planning to retire at the end of 2017 academic year. I received a random email from someone named Max Kahn, a student in the graphic design program, asking if I knew anyone who might be interested in creating Judaic artwork for the Jewish Center. I said I would be happy to meet with him and Rabbi Isabel. The name Kahn was a very important one to my family, and I asked if perhaps Max was related to a well-known rabbi, Howard Kahn, who had married my husband Fred and me many years ago. Max said, well, yes, Howard Kahn was my grandfather. I was instantly connected. Max and I looked back at that first email yesterday and marveled at what has transpired. That's Max standing right there in the background. It turned out, and this is just a quick aside, that Max's grandfather, of course, knew my parents very well because my father worked in the synagogue where Max's grandfather was the rabbi. And Max's father, who also knew my dad, created a song so that my mother could hear that today. And she hasn't heard it yet, but she will after the talk. And that song is one that my father used to always sing whenever he went to Shabbat services. So it's just such a moving experience to have met this wonderful young man who helped me every step of the way through this process and to bring it to fruition now. So I met Max. He took me on a tour of the new space. We saw the Torahs, we saw the chapels. And this is out of order. When we arrived on the third floor, where the show is, everyone's been up there, and I stood at the enormous skylight and the outdoor space surrounded by the three chapels, I found myself covered in goosebumps. Still do every time I go up there. Bashert, for those who don't know the Hebrew word, it means intended. It was just my destiny. Well, I don't consider myself a religious person, but I am spiritual and sometimes superstitious to a fault. Everything converged for me here in this space. My history, my background, my wish to give back to Drexel upon my retirement, to leave a part of myself. And so began this journey. I found great support from the president of the university and the dean of my college, who helped forward this whole event, the whole project. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity I was given, and I'm grateful for all the people who helped me so much throughout this process. And for you, for being here today to share it with me. Every synagogue has certain elements that are required for the protection and adornment of the Torah. The scrolls are handwritten on parchment and wrapped around two rods with beautiful carved handles. This photograph is just something I found online to show you, those of you who might not know, what the Torah situation looks like in most synagogues. When the Torah is not in use, it remains covered with a mantle. You see the three mantles there, and rests in the Aron Kodesh, or the Holy Ark. The curtains within the Aron Kodesh are called the Parochet. When the Torah is taken from the Ark, this is somehow in the wrong order. I'm going to get back so I can figure this out.
Good choice.
That's the whole thing in a nutshell. So when the Torah is taken from the Ark and the mantle removed, It is laid on a table called a bima. The bima has a protective textile that keeps the Torah from being put directly on the table surface. When the Torah is opened and read, there may be a pause in the service at some points. Rather than leaving the Torah exposed, another textile, which I call a Torah scarf, covers and protects the parchment. So a set of textiles for a single Torah would include the Torah mantle, the drapery for the Holy Ark, the table cover, and the scarf. Since we have 3 Torahs here at Perelman, 3 sets were required. When the high holidays roll around each year, all of the Torah textiles are changed to white. So 3 additional sets of textiles were needed for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. 6 sets in all. Had my mission. To understand something about the artwork that ensued, you might need to know something about me. I'm an artist, teacher, wife, mother, daughter, sister, friend. But what colors everything I do is the fact that I'm a first-generation American, the eldest daughter of 2 Holocaust survivors from Czechoslovakia, who brought me to the United States to find my future. My father had a family before the war. His wife and 3 half-brothers, my 3 half-brothers, aged 3, 5, and 7, were killed in Auschwitz. I don't know how my parents were able to carry on after such inconceivable loss, but they invested in a new life, and they raised my 2 sisters and me in a Jewish home. To my parents' chagrin, I did not turn out to be a pious person. I didn't enjoy synagogue, but I loved making things for the synagogue. As a child, I was told that God had given me golden hands, so maybe I didn't have to keep kosher and go to shul every Sabbath. Maybe I could make religious art instead of being religious. One Yom Kippur, I read a powerful song from the prayer book in English. As clay in the hands of the potter who thickens or thins it at will, as stone in the hands of the mason who preserves or breaks it at will, as iron in the hands of the artisan who forges or rejects it at will, as glass in the hands of the blower who shapes or melts it at will, as cloth in the hands of the draper who drapes or twists it at will, as silver in the hand of the smelter who alloys or refines it at will. So are we in your hand. I resonated with the image of God as an artist, a creator, that God works with her hands. So when I began conducting the research for the project, I knew that the hand had to be the primary image that I focused on. So there were a search for images of hands that went on for weeks, till I arrived at the Spock hand. And I thought that was just so wonderful to make that connection. So I spent a great deal of time collecting images and working on ideas and sketches. The pomegranates, the shofar, the facade of Perelman with the shofar in the background, or with camels in the background. I was searching. Grapes, they look beautiful. And there were hundreds of scraps of paper filed around me until the iconic elements began to emerge. I developed a board with imagery and color that would guide me through the process. Whenever I got confused, I came back to this. Whenever I didn't know what the next thing would be, I went back to my board. Just like I always taught my students to do, and it actually works. I really wanted to connect Drexel, the university as a whole, to this project. I was not exactly sure how to do that, but it was very important to me. At a time in my life and growing up when my parents really couldn't afford to send me to college and really wanted me to go to a yeshiva and marry a rabbi and have a religious life, I wanted to be a fashion designer. So Drexel gave me a full scholarship, and I was able to follow my dream and realize my dream. And I felt that I needed to give back. I needed to say something about that start in my life. And so I thought about these words, science, industry, and art, which are the words that, I think this was done sometime in 1890 something. And it's still so true today. This convergence of art and science and technology is so critical in all the work that's done here at this university. So I translated the 3 words into Hebrew, and all of a sudden I could use art, science, and industry throughout all the work. And so all the lettering that you see in Hebrew and all the pieces upstairs, that's what those 3 words are. In the beginning, there was heaven. There was heaven in the morning, there was heaven in the afternoon, heaven in the evening, the 3 times of day when Jews pray. This would become the foundation for the project, the background for all the imagery. As I worked with color to describe the images of heaven, a palette for the project began to form. So once I isolated the color that I wanted to use throughout, I was then able to refer back to this continually as well. The sketches, I started playing around with sketches on top of the sky imagery. Crazy things. Until things started making sense for me and the images started to appear. And these are just crude little teeny pencil sketches on a notepad that I just kept collecting. And once the elements were all assembled and I did the initial editing, I applied the color again. The sketches took on color and the heavens peeked through the imagery. So I had the star and the chai, the vines, the flowers, grapes, and the Torah, and the Star of David, pomegranates, lemons and apples, menorah, and the sky peeked through. Next, I made paper patterns of the elements that would be laser cut in lambskin, a kosher hide, to help with placement and scale. These are all the little pattern pieces. And then I put the background behind them. And in this one, you can follow, here's the paper drawing, paper pattern. And then I sent all my drawings to my former student, Maggie Rowell, who expertly turned the icons into Adobe Illustrator files. She then laser cut the parts in leather, one color at a time. Maggie, where are you? Is she here? She went out, okay. Well, I kind of roped her into this after she did her senior collection with me, and she felt, I guess, a little indebted at the time, and that long past. I kept asking her, oh, would you just cut a few more? And they were so laborious. They took so long, but she hung with it. And there you can see, this is her Illustrator drawing that came from my sketches. And then she took each of these pieces that you see and then cut them in various colors. And here's the beginning of it, where you can see the color flowers, and then the tree in leather, the hand tree. A few more of her drawings. And this one has just the leather pieces on it that I organized onto the surface of the sky background. And then I started stitching each of the pieces on. And here's the cornucopia before it was stitched and just laid out. You can see the little drawing that it came from in the upper right. And then the stitching of all of these little icons. Here's the star one. And then after the stitching was finished, my dear friend, Debbie Schwartzman, came over and taught me how to become a freehand quilter. And she worked with me to establish the direction and stayed with me all through the day yesterday. So she's been with me all along. Here's another quilted piece with the 3 Hebrew words, art, science, and industry. And so from this flat quilt came the Torah mantle and the back of it. And then all the silk pieces that went along. So someone a few minutes ago came up to me and said, "You designed this whole work like you were doing a collection, like a fashion designer." And I just can't escape myself. So there are many little mini collections within the overall collection. So here's the mantle that goes with the 2 pieces before. And this is the cornucopia mantle, bima cover, that goes with this mantle. It was dedicated to my Uncle Sal. And the back. And the scarf. And the blue series. The mantle front and back, and the bima cover, and the scarf. And the bima cover, the mantle, and the scarf. So I'm not pointing out which ones are the high holiday ones. They're the paler in color. Each one of the mantles and bima covers were dedicated to someone in my family who was lost in the Holocaust, or in honor of someone who is still with us. So this one was in memory of Moshe Weiss, my half-brother, who was killed in Auschwitz. And my Uncle Sal. And this I always felt so deprived of having a grandmother. And this one is very special to me. It's in memory of my grandmother, Rivka. I'm named after her, Meyerovitz, who died in Auschwitz. I think everybody in the family's named after her. And this one's in loving memory of my dad. And in honor of the Lebovic sisters, my mother and her 4 sisters, who by some miracle all survived Auschwitz together. The valences for the Perot had to be laser cut in wood. Google found Joe Molinas for me. Here's Joe in the first row right there. He promptly told me that he was a Drexel alum and that he would be most happy to cut the wood. Just like that. So here are the sketches I sent to Joe, and here's what he returned to me. It's amazing, right? And if you look back at this one, which is the one with all the Hebrew letters, here again, it's art, science, and industry printed over and over and over and over again. And that's me wearing my Hanukkah pajamas, which I wore for about a year, and holding up that amazing piece of art. When I thought of the parochet, the curtains, my concept was to envelop the Torah space, the way a talit or prayer shawl envelops the wearer. So the curtains were made of a lightweight, natural fine wool with repetitive striping and long, hand-pulled fringe. This effort involved many, many hands. This is what they look like upstairs. My husband came up with the idea of inviting friends over for pizza and wine and calling it a fringe party. And people came. Thank you to Miriam, Jackie, Cheryl, Gary, Danny, Sally, Flo, Judy, and Fred. Fred also made the wooden circular tops of the Torah mantles, which I'll show you. But these are the hands of all those loving people who helped me. My daughter's hands there. And that's Fred's handiwork, the wooden rings at the top of each piece. The queen of fringe, however, is my mom, whose 93-year-old fingers deftly pulled those barely visible yarns and put the mark, her mark, on this project, just as she has always put her mark on my being. As a Holocaust survivor, she and her 4 sisters taught me the meaning of strength. My aunts, Rose Miller and Rosalie Simon, and their daughters, are with us today. They embody courage, devotion, compassion, and unrelenting resolve. All of this is dedicated to them, the women who were treated with horror and yet maintained their belief in God and taught everyone around them what it means to love. And here, Mom, can you stand? This project represents both a passage and a resolution. My work at Drexel is complete. My history as a Jewish woman evolved from a terrible past to a place of acceptance, hope, and artfulness. Those of you who know me know that I have made many, many dresses in my lifetime, but I have never had the honor of dressing a Torah. I have been inordinately blessed. Thank you.
want to just take a moment to thank Renee before we leave. When we started imagining the Perelman Center, we imagined it would be, those of you I hadn't met, I'm Rabbi Isabel de Koning. I'm the tertiary player in this story, but mostly just grateful to Renee. And when we started to imagine this building, we imagined it not only as a home for Drexel's Jewish community, but also as a place built by Drexel's Jewish community, a place where our students would have a hand in the design, where our students would not only curate the life that happens in it, but where we wanted our students and our faculty and our alumni to really live and breathe every fiber of this building. And when the opportunity to work with Renee, it was b'sher, it just sort of came to be, and it was meant to be, it was clear that this was just the complete embodiment of that. And as her idea about sort of translating this work through hands, and translating this connection between Drexel and Jewish life and her own story through this image of the hands evolved, it was clear that this sort of drew out our hope that our students' own hands would both build the future of the Jewish community, would build this place, and then they would connect with each other. So I want to say one more thing about hands, and one more thing about Renee and her contributions here at Drexel. So there's this, not shocking, there's this Jewish teaching about Moses and Joshua, right at the end of the book of Deuteronomy. When we already sort of know that Moshe's days are numbered and the Jewish community is wondering what its leadership will be next. And God tells Moses to lay his hand on Joshua, and this was going to be how everyone would know that Joshua was meant to be the next leader. And so Moses not only lays one hand, he lays two hands. And Rashi teaches that this is really about Moshe's generosity, right? That he was excited to give over leadership to the next generation, excited to give over that teaching. And fast forward many years in the Jewish community, it's this laying of hands that teachers use when they ordain their students as rabbis. That you become a rabbi when your teacher lays their hands on you and says, you are ready to go out in the world. And it's understood that this is necessary because one might think that a pupil only gets to sort of be the teacher, be the master, once their teacher has passed on, once the person before them. But this is the moment in the Jewish community where we say no. We have this transfer where our teachers can see the work of their students flourish in the world. And Renee has had the privilege of working with students over the years, and she has very much, I'm sure, in the studio, laid her hands on their projects and on their shoulders in tears. I've known a few of them. I know how this fashion process works. A lot of tears, apparently, and late nights. But this laying of hands, right? It's about this deep transmission of generosity. It's about this deep transmission of love and of Torah, of learning. And in this work, Renee's hands have been placed on all of our students. And through their work, she is able to say to our students, you will be able to lead and you will be able to create. And my wisdom can be your wisdom. And the wisdom of my family can be your wisdom. So we're so excited to have these hands and these pieces here at Drexel. And with that, Renee asked me to make a little blessing for this moment. So we'll offer the blessing that's traditional in moments when we use or wear new garments, new things for the very first time. The Shefianu blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shefianu v'kimanu v'hianu b'zman hazeh. Blessed are you, God, who has given us life and has established us firmly in this place and brought us to this moment. May this work forever enrich our community. Thank you so much, Renee.
Amen.
I'm guessing you're happy to answer questions and all of those wonderful things. For folks who are staying with us for Shabbat, there are some lovely services happening on the third floor in that very large room to the right of the stairs. Dinner will be behind us in a bit, and you're free to hang out, kibitz, congratulate Renee on such a fabulous piece. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.